Amen. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to be here today. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. It's crazy that they're so close together. Doesn't seem fair, does it? Can you believe this year's almost over? Amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Did everyone have a great Christmas? Yes, we did too. We definitely did. Santa, once again, was incredibly generous at our house. And I plan on spending the next 6 months thanking him. And his 2 new reindeer this year. Santa got 2 new reindeer, I think courtesy of us, Visa and Amex. In fact, Amanda had this poster hanging on our fridge for inspiration. It's coming? There it is. I want you to keep shopping. People ask me at work all the time if you throw up December if I was prepared for Christmas, and I said I'm very blessed that I'm married to a professional shopper, so I have no worries. We were more than prepared. But Christmas was fun. It's been a crazy week. We're not quite over the Christmas rush, and now we have to gear back up. For tomorrow is New Year's Eve. More celebration, more parties, more family time, more football, so at least there's that. Seems like they should have done a better job of spacing these holidays out. One week doesn't cut it. We needed December. If Christmas was like in July or something, that would be a little easier, because then we'd have time to prepare. Or at least at the beginning of January or December, so that way we have a month between. But a week between Christmas and New Year's, it's just too much. Christmas Eve service was great. Enjoyed it. It was beautiful. I really like trying to set traditions during the month of Advent in order to help hold on to and make the Christmas season special, because it really does go so quick and it goes so fast, and we have to intentionally set aside times where we can reflect on the gift of Jesus and on the impact that his birth has on the world and certainly on our life, because Advent does come and go so quickly. It's like what John Lennon once said, right? So this is Christmas. And what have you done? Another year over, and a new one just begun. Did we take a moment this last Christmas, this last Advent, to ponder the true meaning of this year? Or did we just get swept up in the current? How many parents here got some sleep on Christmas Eve? Yeah, it never truly fails to amaze me how blessed we are. Each year we think there won't be enough, and yet, without fail, there's always more than enough. Each and every year, and Christmas becomes so special. Family, friendship, fellowship, those things are in abundance too. We are truly blessed. And Christmas is behind us, and the New Year is in front of us. And this is the last week of 2018. Could we take one more chance to pause and reflect on the true meaning of Christmas together? One last reminder. Yeah, December 25th is gone, but the truth is Christmas is never truly over. Amen. It's never truly far away, no matter what time of year it is. Take a look at this quick video. I think this will give us a perfect summary of what the gift of Christmas is truly all about.
Time of year we celebrate the birth of Santa. I mean Jesus. Oops, sorry about that. Those two have so much in common. I'm afraid I often get them confused. I mean, we usually think of them as both having beards and being surrounded by happy little children scurrying about. They both have quite an uncommon last name that starts with C. And what's with all the nicknames? They both have a ton of nicknames like Father Christmas, Prince of Peace, Saint Nicholas, Emmanuel, and so on. Speaking of names, does anybody else find it odd that they both somehow know everyone's name? And not just that, I hear they both like to keep detailed records of all of us. But they both seem like pretty generous guys, which is probably why we flood both of them with wish lists and then desperately hope they come through for us. The more I think of it, I guess there are a few important differences. For example, I don't think Jesus was known for wearing velvet, but Santa seems to be obsessed with it. Plus, no one has ever accused Jesus of breaking in through the chimney and eating all the cookies. In the end, I keep going back to Santa's naughty or nice distinction. If we're being totally honest, we'll probably find ourselves hoping Santa isn't too strict, or at least we hope he's grading on a curve. Jesus, on the other hand, came because none of us are nice enough. Of course, we keep trying to convince others and ourselves otherwise. Ultimately, Santa is about me and the stuff I so desperately want. But Jesus is about something more, the grace I so desperately need. Come to think of it, maybe they don't have that much in common after all.
The times may change, right? But the message is still the same. See, this is the incredible news of Christmas. That after all these years, it still means as much to us today as it did to the people in the first century. The timeless truths last forever, continuing to bring hope and peace and joy year after year after year. Now, time is a funny thing, right? We continue to move onward with seemingly increasing speed. Days fly by, weeks fly by, years fly by. This is the last Sunday of 2018. Next Sunday will be the year of our Lord, 2019. This hardly seems possible. Wasn't it just yesterday that we were in a tizzy over Y2K? Perhaps the beginning of the new millennium? On the other hand, doesn't it also seem like a lifetime ago? How many times, just in our lifetime, has the end of the world been predicted? I mean, it seems like someone comes out with a new prediction almost every year. I can think of at least 4 or 5 times just in the last few years. There was the Mayan calendar prediction. That guy with the radio show a few years back. Both Tim LaFay and Hal Lindsey had thought that we would be raptured by now. And yet, the world remains. What could that possibly mean? Well, I think the most important thing that it means is that God still has more for us to do. We've been given a calling to fulfill, and God continues to bless us with more and more time on this earth to fulfill that calling. Time is a strange thing. How we spend it, how we plan for the future, how we prepare for each new day and each new year, I think it depends a lot on what we value in life and what our priorities lie. 2019 is standing on the doorstep. A new dawn, a fresh start. How should we spend this year? The next 365 days lay out before us, each with the promise of hope. Now we can talk about resolutions, and we have talked a lot in the past about resolutions. I saw a meme this week that was funny and said, I can't believe it's been a whole year since I didn't become a better person. It's true. It's true. We have all this great expectation, all this great hope, and then it falls flat. Because we don't like to change. You know, we set these goals, lose weight, stop doing this or that, or start doing this or that, and basic fill in the blanks year after year, and that stayed blank for most of the year. So this year, let's try something different. Let's try something new. How about we make a resolution to change our perspective on life? Let's change the way we look at ourselves and other people that God has placed within our life. See, I think that is something that can truly make a difference in this new year. Let's approach this new year with a positive attitude. It says that Christopher Columbus kept a diary all the way on his way to the discovery of the New World. And it wasn't an easy voyage. The men were on the verge of mutiny. Many of them wanted to turn around. Yet every single day, Columbus would log his entry into his journal, and he would end with this quote. He said, "Today, we moved westward." See, I hope that you were able to write in your journal for 2018, each day I moved forward. Though it hadn't been an easy year, and some of us perhaps have had quite a difficult year, hopefully we felt like we could still move forward. If not physically or financially, hopefully at least mentally and spiritually. And with God's help, 2019 could be our best year yet. See, that's my prayer for each of us. That we move forward. That we continue the journey. That we continue the walk that God has called us each to do, with the goals in mind that God has placed in front of us. With the changing of the year, let's talk about time for a minute. It's always funny to me that the little baby in the new year, and then by the end of the year it's an old man with a long beard, and it really gives you this feeling of, even though it's been a year, it's like this lifetime. And sometimes a year feels like a lifetime. And the older we get, the faster the time seems to fly by. You know, when you're 4 or 5 years of age, time moves real slow. Because your perspective on time is slow. I mean, a year, when you're 5 years old, that's a fifth of your life. Now, when you're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, a year is not that big apart in comparison. It seems like no time at all. And we'll take down the Christmas decorations, and all of a sudden we'll know it'll be Easter, or Lent. We can't skip Lent because that does seem to drag on forever. But Easter will be here. And then before we know it, it'll be hanging in the greens again. We'll be putting up the decorations. And we'll be like, wow, it's been a whole year already. We'll just leave them up. That makes a lot of sense. The church looks so much better when it's decorated anyway. Before we know it, another Christmas will be here. You know, it was Albert Einstein who introduced us to the idea that time is relative. Now, sometimes this theory of relativity has been reduced to the example of a young man sitting for a moment on a hot stove versus sitting for a moment on the lap of a pretty girl. That is certainly a time-relative thing. One moment can seem very long, while the other can seem very short. Or perhaps another idea that we can all relate to is this. In bed, it's 6 a.m., you close your eyes for 5 minutes, it's 7:45. At work, it's 1:30, or at school, close your eyes for 5 minutes, and it's 1:30. Or perhaps this one. One day on Jupiter lasts 9 hours. That's the same as a weekend on Earth. Now, that is not exactly what Einstein meant, but he did show us that time is relative. According to his theory, as I understand it, if we could travel at a velocity approaching the speed of light, time would essentially slow down. Now, what do I mean by slowing down? Someone has given this example. If an astronaut is launched at high speed into space, he will return measurably younger than his twin brother who was left at home. Or like the poem that says, there once was a young girl named Miss Wright who could travel much faster than light. She departed one day in an Einsteinian way and came back on the previous night. Kind of captures the idea. There's another scientist who had written exclusively on the subject of time, and that was Stephen Hawking, a brilliant physicist. He wrote a book entitled A Brief History of Time. Now, it amuses me that Hawking, as such an amazing intellect, he was also an avid fan of the cartoon The Simpsons. And in fact, he made several appearances on the show. And he liked to attend the table readings, which table readings in cartoon speak is like a dress rehearsal, where all the characters would go through their readings before they animated and recorded it. And one day, Stephen was almost 30 minutes late to the table reading rehearsal. The other actors were sitting around, they were becoming agitated. And one of the actors looked at the others and complained and says, "Does this man have no concept of time?" Which is hilarious, because he literally wrote the book on the subject. But for most of us, the passage of time is a mysterious affair which we'll never fully comprehend. Has anyone ever attended a time management seminar? The title suggests that we can manage time. These workshops on time management are generally known now by a different name, perhaps Managing Multiple Priorities Seminar, because we finally figured out that time is not something we can manage. Time is something that exists, and all we can hope to do is manage our priorities within the time frame that already is set. How successfully we manage these priorities determines a great deal to a great deal of how successful we will be in life. The Bible has a lot to say about time and time management. Psalm 90 verse 12 reads, Lord, teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. Why do we manage our time? So that we can apply our hearts to wisdom. See, I think that might be a good memory verse for this new year. Teach us to value these next 365 days. Teach us to number these days. And somebody can figure out quickly how many minutes and how many seconds and how many hours there are in a year. Teach us, Lord, to measure those, to treasure those, so that we will be wiser. We can apply our hearts to that. The letter that we read from Paul to the church of Galatia this morning speaks of time. Not the passage of time or the relativity of time or even the management of time, but it speaks about the fulfillment of time. Let's look again. When the set time had fully come, God sent His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are His sons, God sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are His child, God has also made you an heir. What an important passage. When the time had been fully arrived, when the set time had come. Now, a lot of us think of this in terms of the King James Version, which says, when the fullness of time had come. And what both versions are basically saying is when the time God had chosen had arrived. God sent Christ into the world. Now, it always amazes me about when Jesus came. You know, we had all this prophecy for hundreds and hundreds of years about a Messiah. Then Jesus came at that moment in history. And now we've had all this time since then that we've reflected on it, looked, and waited for a second coming. Why did God choose that specific time in history and not today, for instance? I mean, it seems like today with mass media and social media and everything like that would be a much bigger place and much bigger venue for Jesus' message. Why did God choose that time? Well, Scripture says it was the fullness of time. This was the perfect time. What was going on during this time and made this the perfect time? Does God ever do anything when it's not the perfect time? Sometimes, okay, most of the time, we would like to see God work in our lives right at the moment when we expect it, or when we ask for it, or when we need it. And yet God sometimes takes His time. Sometimes God makes us wait. Sometimes we are called to be patient and continue to be patient. How often have we had to wait for the right season? And then when God shows up in our lives, we later look back and go, oh man, His timing was great. What perfect timing. Many times, I believe it's so that we can learn to trust, learn to have patience, perhaps learn to pray more diligently. Because the bottom line is this: God knows what He's doing. All the time. All the time. And He knows it better than we know it. And Christmas is no exception. Jesus came to earth precisely at the right moment in human history. Now think about it. God had already been at work for thousands of years, bringing about the right conditions for His birth. The prophets had testified to the Jewish people that out of David's line a Savior would be born, and of His kingdom there would be no end. When the Savior was born, Jews were scattered throughout the known world. In every major city there was a synagogue. This was the very first place where the early Christian evangelists went to proclaim the new faith. The foundation was beginning to be set. It was clear biblically that there was no other faith than the Jewish faith from which Christianity could have originated. The stage was also set culturally for His coming. 300 years before Christ, a son was born to a Macedonian king named Philip. The son was a guy named Alexander. We know him now as Alexander the Great. It took Alexander only 12 years to conquer the known world of his time. And what did he do when he conquered the known world? But spread the Greek language over most of the civilized world. See, Greek became the international language by which the gospel would be communicated. In the Gospels themselves, particularly in the writings of Paul, we see the influence of Greek philosophy and thought. Greek culture broke down some of the barriers of nationalism. The influence of Alexander the Great helped pave the way for the coming of Christ. Christ's birth was set spiritually. Christ's birth at that time was set culturally. Then he came in the midst of the great Roman Empire. Now, what did the Romans do to help perpetuate the gospel? Well, the Romans furnished a system of law which made it possible for the gospel to grow in relative stability. Not long before Christ's birth, Julius Caesar built roads that made commerce possible all over the empire. Now, these roads also facilitated travel by the first Christian missionaries. Christ's birth came at the perfect time. When the time set had fully come, God sent His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to become His sons and daughters. He came at the perfect time. Why did He come? That we might become sons and daughters. What a great message for this new year. Because of Jesus, we are now sons and daughters of God. So what does this say to you? What does this mean to you? Now, it seems strange. We use this term, sons of God, daughters of God, a lot, but if you ever really think about it, doesn't it seem a little odd to call ourselves a son of God? Because really there was only one Son of God. Jesus was the unique Son of God. Now we can perhaps more easily identify ourselves with a child of God instead of a son, maybe because of the hang-up with the name that Jesus has. Child perhaps seems humble enough, small, little, innocent, maybe not so innocent, but helpless child. See, a child is somebody who doesn't really know any better. Whereas a son or a daughter, they should know better. They are in the image of their parent. Claiming to be Jesus, the Son of God. You know, we lock people up for claims like that, don't we? There's a famous story about a man that psychologist Richard Bandler was working on who claimed to be Jesus. And Bandler asked him, "Are you Jesus?" And the man answered, "Yes, my son." Bandler said, "Okay, I'll be right back." And he left, and the man stood there confused. Within a few minutes, Bandler came back and he held a measuring tape, asking the man to hold out his arms. And he began to measure the length of his arms, height from his body head to toe, and then Bandler left again. The man claiming to be Christ still was a little concerned. A few moments later, Bandler came back with a hammer, some large spiked nails, and a set of boards. He began to pound them together into the form of a cross. And the man said, "What are you doing?" Bandler asked again, "Are you Jesus?" And he said, "Well, yes, my son." And Bandler said, "Well, then you know why I'm here and what I'm doing." Suddenly a wave of recognition swept across the patient's face, and he stepped back and shouted, No, wait, I changed my mind. I'm not Jesus after all." You see, saying that we're children of God is no problem. But we're saying that we're sons and daughters of God might be problematic for us. Of course, we're not claiming to be on Christ's level. But neither are we the worms in the dust. We are God's elect. To use another term that Paul used to describe us, we need to see ourselves as God sees us. See, I think it would make a big difference in this new year of how we lived our lives if we saw ourselves as sons and daughters of the King of Kings. Back in 2006, ABC News carried a fascinating story about a young woman named Sarah Culberson. Adopted 2 days after her first birthday, Sarah grew up the youngest daughter of a close-knit family in Morgantown, West Virginia. Sarah was surrounded by love in her home, but always wondered about her roots. Like many adopted children, she wanted to learn about her birth parents. So at the age of 22, she decided to do a search. She quickly learned that her mom had died a dozen years earlier from cancer. She was crushed. A few years later, a private investigator helped her to locate her birth father, along with an unbelievable surprise. You see, Sarah wasn't an average suburban girl. Sarah was a princess. Her father was the ruling member of the Mende tribe of Mumpe, Sierra Leone, when he was living in Africa. By birthright, Sarah was royalty. She could only be known, she could one day be known as the paramount chief in a country she's never even seen. Talking with ABC's Robin Roberts on Good Morning America, Sarah said it took a while to process the shock of discovering her biological dad. For one thing, it took a couple of years to kind of deal with finding my father and having two dads to begin with. Then, to come to realize my dad was the reigning king of a country. Her African father invited her to come to Africa to meet her family. When she arrived in Sierra Leone, the entire Bumpé community came out to welcome its princess. A happy homecoming for the American girl who never knew that by searching for her birth parents, she'd find the meaning of her own identity. They were amazing, Sarah said, remembering her first impression of the people. There were 200 to 300 people there welcoming me. They were singing and dancing, and I was like, what did I do to deserve this? Now, while she found the country beautiful and exciting, it was also heartbreaking. Sarah saw people suffering from a horrible civil war, so she wanted to help. She started a nonprofit foundation to assist the Bumpé people. She wrote a book. Sarah says her West Virginia family, who could have resented her for her search for her real parents, has stuck through her discovery, stuck by her with her. She said they're like angels. They would support her in whatever she wanted to do. She cautions other adoptees trying to find their biological parents. She says, don't have any expectations. I didn't even know if I'd get a return phone call. All of a sudden I realize I'm a princess. Sarah's search, however, has resulted in a new life and a new mission, helping the Bumpé people. For her, being a princess means doing her part. The title princess, she says, means responsibility. And that's what I'm taking on. The title princess does mean responsibility. So does the title son of God or daughter of God. You see, you and I also have responsibilities as God's children.
That's right.
What gifts have we been given? Do you remember the scene in The Lion King where Simba the young lion is being challenged to go back home and be the king he was born to be? Simba had run from his destiny. The struggle in confronting his mean uncle was just too difficult. But there was a memorable scene which represents a turning point in Simba's life. He looks at the water and he sees the subtle reflection of his father, Mufasa, the king. And Mufasa says to Simba, you have forgotten who you are. Look inside yourself, Simba. You are more than what you have become. Remember who you are. See, that's basically Paul's message to us as we end this year and begin another. Remember who you are. When the set time had fully come, God sent His Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship. Because you are His sons and His daughters. And God sent the Spirit of His Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. You are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are His child, God has also made you an heir. We have access to all the benefits and all the blessings that God has. Look inside yourself. You are more than you think you are. Because of what Christ has done on your behalf, you are a son or a daughter of the King. See, that carries with it some responsibilities. But it's an amazing gift. All we have to do is remember who we are. This new year, as we plan our resolutions, or as we think about making a fresh start, let's look into ourselves and change our perspective on who we are and who we're called to be. We are sons and daughters of God. What an incredible honor. Undeserved, of course. But thanks to all that stuff last week, with Jesus being born and all, it's been given to us.
Amen.
Not only is it an honor to be the sons and daughters of the King, it's a challenge too. One that carries with it some hefty responsibility. We just can't live any way we want to anymore. We're called to a higher standard. The truth is, why would we want to spend our time laying in the garbage and rat-infested alleyways anyway? Especially when we have an invitation to sit at the table with the King. See, each of us are called to remember who we are. And that's the motto for 2019. To be who we were created to be. To be the sons and daughters of God and carry forth His message of love and hope and peace. May this new year bring you joy. And may the love of God that may the love of God that you carry in your hearts be reflected in all that you say and do. Or as Paul puts it in Ephesians 4, he says this, in light of all this, here's what I want you to do. While I'm locked up here, a prisoner for the master, I want you to get out there and walk. Better yet, run on the road that God has called you to travel. I don't want any of you sitting around on your hands. I don't want anyone strolling off down some path that goes nowhere. And mark that you do this with humility and discipline. Not in fits and starts, but steadily. Pouring yourselves out for each other in acts of love. Alert at noticing differences, and quick at mending fences. You are all called to travel the same road and in the same direction, so stay together, both outwardly and inwardly. You have one master, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who rules over all, works through all, and is present in all. Let everything you are and think and do be permeated with oneness. Let's make this year a year of becoming one. One with ourselves, one with each other, especially one with God. See, right now we're standing at the doorstep of 2019. It's on the horizon. What will this year hold? What will we encounter? What failures? What successes? How should we proceed? The new year lies before us, ripe with opportunity. And all we have to do is put one foot in front of the other. Take each day one step at a time. Keep moving forward. This is the year that we're called to trust God and just keep on walking. And you know what? He'll take care of all the rest. Amen.
Amen.